Well, if we're all set, I'd like to get us going here. My name is Jesse Mullins. I'm the editor of this publication here, and I've already talked to some of you, and I know some of you know it. And anyway, that's what I do, and I'm really excited about this lineup of speakers we have. This morning, we're going to kick off this whole these sessions with Dr. Bill Price. First, let me say I want to thank you for coming out to the Expo. And I want to thank our sponsors. They're Tetra Tech, James Environmental Management, Highlock, Finley Investigations and Security, Burma's Permian Basin Oil and Gas Directory, and Permian Basin Oil and Gas Magazine. And as a courtesy to the speakers and those around you, I ask you to please turn your cell phones to silent at this time. And if you do have access to Twitter on your phone, if you'd please take a minute and follow us on is it up here behind me? Yeah, right here. This is where we are. This is the event. This is the show, and this is the event we're in right now. So if you can tweet that, that'd be wonderful. And you can post anything you'd like to say. You know, we'd love to get your feedback. If you want to mention one of the high points, that'd be fantastic. I'm going to pass around some evaluations before we're done today. Before you leave, if you please fill one out and turn it in, that'd be great. Our first session today is how managers can encourage high levels of employee motivation. How do you motivate and reward a wide range of employees under one company? Whether your workers are hourly, salaried, or an executive, there are ranges of incentive options. Here to share with us some incentive options and tips for strengthening your company through leadership and motivation is Dr. Bill Price. Dr. Price is currently Dean of the College of Business and Engineering at University of Texas Permian Basin, UTPB. He's published some 20 articles, and Bill, I bet that's a larger number now. I mean, he was writing for us every month.
About twice that.
Yeah, probably twice. I figured it was. Articles and columns related to business, strategic management, and human resource management, and he's made 18 presentations at academic conferences. His service to the profession includes serving as a reviewer for dozens of manuscripts at academic journals, and he has served on program committees for major academic conferences. He served on the board of directors of American Air Power Heritage Museum, Permian Basin SHRM, that's Human Resources Society, Human Resource Managers, mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Abilene Civic Center, as well as active involvement in several other charities. And I asked him if I could say this. He didn't have this in his notes, but I just love to be able to say this about him. He's had a career in the Air Force. He was a bombardier on B-1s and B-52s, and I just think that's so cool. Anyway, I please ask you to please join me in welcoming Dr. Bill Price.
Thank you. It's a small group right here. I won't talk to these people over here. But because it's a real small group and we're kind of close here, please interrupt anytime you want. If you have a question, maybe something that you saw at work or is relevant, that's fine. We'll go with that. Becky's going to be our manual slide turner here. We're going to talk about primarily motivation, different areas of motivation. And that's a definition. And motivation is an inner power that's inside of a person. It's hard to define. It's an inner power that's inside of a person. It's sort of intrinsic. It's something that you just have in you that makes you want to move ahead to accomplish something. It's desire and ambition. Now that being said, I don't know an awful lot about this. That's kind of a profound thing to say. The reality is there are books written on motivation, there's articles, there's speakers, there's videotapes. I mean, if you go into a library, you would see shelves and shelves and shelves on that. There are people who make a career out of this tiny little piece of it, and they're very good at it. I don't make a career out of it. But I have several decades worth of supervision. I teach it, some education in it. I think I can expound on in general terms. Point is, I'm not an expert and you can stump me. It's easy to do. Okay. That being said, These are reasons why you might care about this talk or this discussion is what it really is. The first and foremost is it will increase your productivity, if that's important to you. It can increase your productivity at work in terms of quality, in terms of volume, in terms of sales, in terms of profits, all of those types of things. That in itself is important. It will do these other things as well, reduce your turnover and so forth. And then the company culture is important. We'll touch on that in just a little bit here. Let me tell you a story. A while back, and actually somewhere in there, God, I must be 90 years old, there was a period of time that I worked in the practice of HR in industry. And I remember I was working for a big box company, and I was an HR manager, and I would find employees for people. It was in a hardware area. And I got a new employee for this guy. And a couple of days later, he comes in my office and says, "You got the worst employee in the world for me. I had to fire him, I had to let him go." I said, "Okay, no problem, we'll see if we can find somebody else." So we go out searching, we find another employee, and a couple of days later, we got a replacement employee. Lo and behold, the next day he comes back and I had to let them go too. You don't get me good employees. I do the best I can. Well, this guy just didn't want to work, he was goofing off, he just wasn't motivated, so I got him another employee. And sure enough, the same thing happened again. And now he's chewing me out because I'm bringing lousy employees to him, ones that aren't employed. And I said, "Dave, what's going on? What's the problem?" He said, "Well, you just don't bring good employees. When am I going to get a good employee?" Well, I think you know what's unfolding here. I'm supposed to keep supplying him with employees until he gets the perfect employee. It isn't out there. They were good employees to begin with. And I tell you this story because, not because of the stupidity of that supervisor, but because I learned that's what many people think. He forgot that it was his job as a supervisor to motivate him. He forgot that, or didn't understand it. Because you can take an average employee or even a weak employee, properly motivate them, properly train them, and make a great employee out of them. Now that's important as we go through this, because the problem is really the supervisor's problem, not the employee's problem. So that being said, everyone's not the same. Everyone is not equal. You know this, but I'm just going to remind you of this. Everyone's not equal. It depends on the industry you're in. Each industry is different from each other. It depends on the level of the employee within the company. You know this, but I'm going to remind you of this, because if we go through this, these things aren't going to apply to everybody equally. We have the owner of the company, and some of you are probably owners or your top management, and you think differently than mid-level employees, who think differently than supervisors, who think differently than your technicians, who think differently than entry-level workers, unskilled, uneducated, who think differently than professionals, accountants and engineers. They're not motivated by the same thing, clearly. Okay, so that, I'm just setting a framework for that. Okay, next slide. Okay, take a look at this. It says, what managers and employees think will cause motivation? The red lines start at the highest from the employee's point of view in a series of surveys. They were mostly motivated by appreciation for what they did. Seems like a no-brainer. And then next, being in on things, help on personal problems, and so forth. The blue lines are what the managers thought on their survey, which you can see are not the same. They thought that good wages would motivate people more than anything else. This is actually an old study, it's been around a while. Out of curiosity, I did this with another company to ask the same questions. I came up with the same results, exactly, between the managers and the supervisors. Same thing. Supervisors tend to think that this and maybe job security would motivate people. It doesn't. And appreciation, of course, is a pat on the back, way to go, thank you, maybe a certificate. That motivates people more than anything else. Recognition in front of their peers. The second one may not be so obvious. Feeling of being in on things. That means knowing why we do things. Why does management do the strange things that they do? Explaining it to them. Telling the company's secrets, so to speak. They're not really secrets, but they appear to be that. Just the other day, where I'm at, I'm trying to motivate a series of about 40 faculty to get them to buy into something. And I stopped and thought about this. Let me tell them some things that people don't normally tell them. So I explained to them the reason we were interested in growth and so forth, and what would happen. I explained break-even points and variable costs and so forth, and they kind of get that. And why we had to get to a certain level of employment. So, and what, this is why it's in the strategic plan. So now they kind of get it. They're in on things. And then I had them make a decision on what should we do. Next thing I know, they're buying into this. There's discussion. This is supposed to be a 20-minute long discussion. It went on for 45 minutes. And at the end, everyone agreed with what I wanted them to agree with in the first place, because they felt in on it. And they're highly motivated. They come in now and say, what are we going to do next? So they become more engaged in what's happening. So that's important, to get them engaged, to get them feel like they're part of the organization, that they have an impact on it. Then they will be highly motivated, and then they start to put out not 80%, but 100% or 110%. That's what you're trying to accomplish, I hope. So, yes.
So there are sometimes new challenges.
Wait, is this anybody water here? Who was in here earlier? I'm thirsty.
So there are sometimes.
It was really my water. I'm sorry, Henry.
So sometimes there are new challenges, and you need employees to help you overcome these challenges. And part of the motivation is expanding their knowledge and expanding their horizon. So, and I would put this like number 3 or number 4 also. Like sometimes helping them to grow professionally or expanding their knowledge. This also would motivate them to help you overcome that challenge.
Well, I agree with you 100%. And I'm not sure if education is really in there. But you could see it, pieces of it here and there. But yeah, educating them in terms of just in general ways, as well as educating about the specifics of the company. Yeah, sure. That's been your experience?
Yeah.
Okay. Good point. Does this kind of match what you all have seen, or? Okay. Yes.
So is there a correlation?
Belinda, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Between the appreciation and taking ownership for the employees, is there like a high correlation with that?
There is. By ownership, you mean they feel like they're a part of the company, they have an impact on what happens? Yes. And we're going to look closer at that in just a moment. Yeah. You're on the mark. Jesse?
The point about the feeling of being in on things, does that extend to like things like maybe planning or goal setting or looking forward?
That's exactly what we're talking about. Yes, exactly. Okay, next slide. Okay, bear with me a minute. I'm a professor, so I got to go through the theory. But it just kind of puts it in perspective. What is motivation? It's a certain amount of effort a person puts out, and the expectation is that that effort will increase their own ability to perform, that they think that they can do it, and when they perform, it means that they will have a certain perception by their supervisor. It will result in a certain outcome, and that outcome is a reward of some type, pat on the back, attaboy, maybe financial, whatever. And that outcome is worthwhile for the effort in the first place. That's the theory. Okay, sorry. Next slide. These are some different theories of motivation. I don't want to go too deep into a so-called academic classroom, but some of you may have seen these. We'll touch on some of these briefly, but we can't have a discussion on motivation without covering some of this stuff. Expectancy is what we just now looked at. Equity is kind of the last part of that. Is it the effort put forth is worth it in the end, that your result is worth it, and that your reward is equitable compared to what other people get. So if I get a raise of, I don't know, $5 an hour, and Susie over here gets a raise of $15 an hour, it's not equitable. So people will find out eventually. Needs, that's the old Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't place much creed with that. Theory and X and Y workers. Has anyone ever heard of that before? It doesn't have much value in the workplace. Theory X workers are lazy, don't want to work. You have to bludgeon them and push them to make them work. Theory Y workers are people who want to work, they're inspired. You just have to remove the roadblocks. It's an old saying goes, Theory X, Theory Y workers. Not much practicality. Needs is, has to do with achievement, the need for achievement, the need for power to control things, the need for affiliation with other people. I'm not going to get too much into that. I wrote an article, I guess it's going to appear next month. It has a lot on that though. Two-factor and the goal setting, we're going to look at that briefly. Next slide. This is the two-factor. It was done by a management guru, Frederick Hertzberg, Harvard professor, written many books on it. It's been around a while. The point of this is he's partially right and he's partially wrong. But I always thought it was interesting because there are two factors. One, certain things of these 15 items cause employees to be satisfied and hence motivated to work hard in the workplace, such as achievement and recognition. We just talked about that. And certain things cause them to be dissatisfied. In the absence of them is some sort of hygiene thing. And a classic case is this long line company policy administration. What that means is if you have lousy policies where you're working at, it makes employees very upset. They don't like it there. They may even leave. But having great policies doesn't motivate them, does it? Doesn't motivate them to work harder. So it can only make them dissatisfied and demotivated, but the opposite does not motivate. It's a classic case. Okay, some other categories. Achievement, by not having achievement or not having responsibility doesn't demotivate them, but it can motivate them. So he's right in those respects, and I always like to look at this because it's a reminder to me. But he's partially wrong, I think. This one here on salary is the interesting one that everyone points out. Having a pretty good salary does not motivate people to work harder on a day-to-day basis. And you in the room, you don't sit and think, well, I'm making this amount of money, therefore I'm going to do a good job today or this hour. It doesn't go through your mind, does it? It doesn't. It's some of these other things. But if you're way underpaid, it might go through your mind and say, I don't like it here, I'm not going to do a good job. That's the concept. But it's partly wrong because there are other parts of compensation, such as bonuses, incentives, and so forth, which are monetary, maybe commission. They do think about that. So he's kind of wrong in that way. I also think he's wrong with respect to this one and this one. I think that great supervisors do motivate. Think about it. It's been said that one of the reasons that people stay with a company that they don't even particularly like is because their friends are there. They stay with a company because they have a great boss, they have a relationship with the boss. The boss maybe is their friend, they just like working for this person. And maybe they go to lunch with them. Many people in the Permian Basin work for small companies, and it's that way. So I think a great boss or great employees can be a motivator. We're going to look at that a little bit closer too in a moment. Okay, we'll go through these fairly quickly. You know about merit pay options and so forth. It can depend on an individual merit, or it can be a work group. Sometimes if you're working as a team, it's not fair to pay this person in the team and not this person because it destroys the team. They have to be paid equally. Next slide. These things occur as well. Piece rate pay. In other words, how many items do you make? I went through a factory a while back. There was a clothing manufactory near Abilene, and they had sewing machines, and these workers all made uniforms, fire-resistant uniforms, in fact, is what they were doing. And the faster they made them, the more money they made. So there's a certain motivation directly tied to compensation there, of course. God, I hate to do that all day. Commissions is obvious for outside sales type people. There's some other things. I don't know if you've heard of Scanline plans, profit sharing. They're pretty cool. They're very sophisticated and hard to explain, and it means total education of employees. Anybody know what these are ever? No? I should do an article on that, I guess. Next slide. Bonuses are an interesting thing. I'm a strong advocate of bonuses as opposed to salary raises where possible. Remember, if you give a bonus, they see the direct reward for what they did. If they don't perform next time, next quarter, or the next year even, you can withdraw the bonus. You just don't give it. But if you give them a salary and they don't perform next year, you're stuck with the salary. And the salary keeps increasing. So a bonus is better if you can do it. But in reality, you need to do a little bit of both because your salary has to keep up with other peers and competition and so forth. Also, in these other bullets here matter, if salary is totally unrelated to your performance, so I can pay this person more than this person because they outperform them, in the things that are on here. Okay, next slide. All right, let's get into some specifics. We're looking at the I don't want to say lower level, but maybe employees that are not upper level management. Tends to be more the hourly workers. The thing in this area is a pickup truck and a fuel card. Everyone knows that. It's valued quite a bit. Meals means a heavy reimbursement rate at Stripes or whatever your favorite restaurant is. It's been said that that's the most popular restaurant in Odessa is Stripes. Uniform allowance, whether you've got, oh my, nobody in here has a shirt with a logo on it. Is yours? No.
Everyone does. Yes, sir.
You do, okay. I get a kick out of going to a restaurant. In Midland, Odessa, everyone's got a little shirt with a logo here, and I've gotten in the habit of doing the same thing, or at least a baseball hat. It's a culture thing. But also, many companies provide those shirts for free, of course, to advertise. And then, of course, they have fire-resistant clothing. If you have to buy it on your own, it is incredibly expensive. Steel-toe shoes and so forth. So that is a pretty important benefit. And to say nothing of overtime pay. Yes?
But do we know how much like these add cost to the company?
I don't know. Maybe someone in the room knows. What is the set of the overalls, fireproof clothing?
No. I mean,
Oh.
like all of these, like if the company wants to incent the guy, I mean, how much percentage here we are speaking? Is it like 50%? Is equal to 50%?
It's a hard thing to answer. Here's why. First of all, it depends on how much is the employee making versus that, and then each item is going to vary. If you're a low-level employee, close to minimum wage, just the benefits alone can run 25 to 30%, in fact, closer to 30% of your pay, just that. They're not incentives, though. So then you start throwing this on top of it. I mean, overtime pay can be 100%. Uniform and clothing, my point is, it depends on how much they're making. I don't know what they cost. I think it is like $200 for overall, is that right?
What
Yeah.
is the uniform?
Yeah.
So our jumpsuits are about 79 plus the G logo on.
$79?
Yeah,
Okay.
just for one.
All right.
Plus the steel toe boots, hard hat, things like that. We figure up per person we spend about $1,000
About 1,000 for everything, yeah.
per.
Because you'll have multiple sets. Yeah. So the percentage-wise, I guess, then that may last, I don't know, a year or two.
Yeah,
And then there's a turnover. Yeah, turnover and all that kind of stuff. It's hard to answer that.
I guess the question that I wanted to ask is that let's forget about the overtime pay.
Mm-hmm.
So about the other three items, I mean, are we speaking here about something that it's a lot for the company or something a little but will be worth a lot to the employee? How much we are speaking here? Is it something too small for the company but will be
It's going to be expensive. Let's take the truck, which is pretty common around here. I mean, a truck payment is going to run $400 or $500 a month.
$1,500 a month.
$1,500?
If you're gonna go ahead and lease those trucks, because you're gonna turn them over every 2 or 3 years.
Oh, and then you're
You gotta
paying,
pay them out in 40 months or less.
wow,
You pay about 1,500 a truck.
plus gas.
And the fuel, of course, varies based on what the guys, how much, traveling he does. I've got guys that go, their fuel card runs $1,000 a month to 2,500,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how much.
So you're looking at 20 to 25,000 a year per person. So just for that, so that would be, or more.
Yeah.
So it's substantial. It could, depending what they earn too. I mean, it's going to be at least 50% of their pay.
$50,000 a year.
Yeah.
50% of the salary.
It could be as much as
It depends.
80, 90% of their pay. Yeah. So, yeah, it's substantial.
But at the same time, here in this area, if you don't offer that, you're not able to compete because everybody's offering that. It's more than an incentive, it's a given.
Yeah, it is. Expensive as it is.
It's kind of an expectation.
Yeah, exactly, it's an expectation.
So it's not anymore incentive, it's like standard.
Well, we might go back to the other thing where there's things that are incentives, but the absence of it is a great disincentive. You won't work there.
But I think that's gonna change with the market how it is now.
Could.
It's not so much, it does become more of an incentive instead of what they expect.
Yeah.
I think it's also how you highlight maybe like your first of all, looking at the salary you're gonna offer that person anyway to begin with, and then you kind of gotta weigh out what you're gonna cost, the costs are gonna be, because those do, I think, eventually, those benefits and incentives can definitely make a person pick a job, even if the salary might be a little bit lower, if they look and they can see the real numbers of how much, health insurance and all these different benefits that you offer can be, as opposed to doing it alone or as
Oh,
a
yeah.
contractor.
Employees are fully aware of this. Yeah.
And other than picking the job, okay, now he's in the job, or he or she, they are in the job. I mean, does this really increase productivity, or by how much? By 100%, by 10%, by, do we know, is there any study, is there an?
I think it probably is more retention of the employee as opposed to you seeing actual numbers
Yeah.
coming. So you look at retention, so then you gotta think of the cost of turnover, if you're gonna have that constantly, because you don't offer these things. So it's not just a direct benefit of seeing numbers on your.
So
I-
Even just adding meals, and it's not to all of our employees, it's just a small percentage that sit out on location for 24 hours. We were taking out groceries, and that was so hard on one person to go out there 2 or 3 times,
Yeah.
and then them having their grocery list. So when we just added per diem, it just changed their attitude, because then they were kind of in control, and then they had that, and they weren't dependent on somebody else, even though it cost the company, 3 times what we were paying. It, changed the motivation.
Yeah. It's not so much the cost. Yeah. It's a good point. Well, this is a pretty controversial topic on the trucks. I'm going to go a step further. And I think that it is not so much a motivator, but you can make it a motivator this way. Those same trucks we're talking about, allow the employees to customize the truck within reason. Within reason. Allow them to put customized wheels on it, maybe a head rack bar, special lights, maybe a different type of sound system than came with it. Now they're doing, and of course you pay for it. Now these are special things and they get more interested in it. Now it's special, now it's a motivator. I've seen that happen.
Is
Okay.
that something they earn, or is it right off the bat?
Well, it's on a case-by-case basis. I've known some employees say, guess what they're letting me do? And because they did a good job, but the next employee says, well, we'll think about it and so forth, maybe later on. So now it gets to be a reward done very subtly that you can do.
Did you say that the employer pays for those?
Yes, yes. I know that happens.
But I think up top too, it might be something, that can be from the beginning, because that could also make a difference between a person. Like when people talk about jobs out here, they're gonna talk about this company or what, oh man, what kind of benefits they offer, and like when we start here, I got to, small things like I got to customize my wheels or, my sound system, my preference to my seating, whatever. So I think those things kind of go, it's an anomaly, I think, out here to apply theoretical things sometimes just because
Sure. I mean, think about what Sam just said. He's more than I thought. $1,500 a month for a truck. So what if you spend an extra $400 on a sound system?
and it's a one-time thing that you
Yeah.
don't have to.
Next slide. Becky. Okay. You may not be JR, but then we move it up a notch to the owners, the top executives, and some of you may be in that category. Some of you are pretty young, but you still may be top executives, the way things are in the Permian Basin. Of course, country club, which is incredibly expensive here. But that being said, some people are members of multiple country clubs in this area. To say nothing of the petroleum club in downtown. Still the company truck, but it may become a car. I remember the coolest thing ever happened to me. Years ago when I was a young man, I was about 23 years old and I went to work for a company. And my company car was a Firebird. Some of you older know what that is. A Firebird with a big eagle on the hood was my company car and a 400 horsepower engine. It was so cool. I hated the job, but I just wanted that car. I couldn't believe it. Of course, your hours as an executive become more and more flexible, and essentially no hours at all. You do what you need to do wherever you need to do it. So that is a very nice thing. And not all companies allow that, but some say just whatever you think is good. Brokerage advice is maybe a possibility. Personal benefits at work, there are some strange things that go on, such as car washes out in the parking lot. Not that expensive, but a pretty nice deal. Covered parking. There are things that could happen within the business, such as massages, pedicures for the females and that sort of thing. A pretty neat deal, and honestly not that expensive when you stop and think about it. Makes it a special place to work for. Next slide. Oh, on that previous one, I overlooked the professional workers. Those people who are not exactly in management, but there might be the engineers, possibly attorneys, possibly HR, possibly accountants. And the things that motivate them is a little bit different. It tends to be some of the things for the executives, but you might go into special training, motivates those people a lot. Sending them out to training someplace else. New equipment, upgrades, computers, and that sort of thing. Dual screens. Little things like that can motivate them. It's a matter of caring. Some unusual things. Daycare for children is becoming more and more popular in these days. It is a really big deal. On-site wellness, meaning you have a nurse that either stays there, if it's a big enough company, or they come and visit once a week or every 2 weeks for free. And that can pay a lot of benefits, particularly in wintertime, flus, cold, sore throats. You don't have to, your employees don't take 2 or 3 hours off to go to the doctor. The nurse comes to them and dispenses the medicine. This is really crazy not to do this. Linda.
Yeah, I've heard of actually to counselors, companies offering like therapeutic services for like their employees' families, like, and not someone that stays on site, but as a benefit, to offer a few hours, a month for counseling services for the family, for kids, and things like that.
So they go to a wellness, yeah, in fact, it's pretty common these days. A quick place. But some of them will actually bring a nurse on site to dispense medicine. Of course, there's the neat things, event tickets to Noel Wagner or something like that. You pass them out as incentives for a series of employees, and you, as a company, you can get discounts on that. I know some that will take company trips and shut down the company for a week to go to Baja. Gift cards, gyms, we're talking about larger. Well, small company can offer a gym membership to World Gym or MCH or something like that. I don't see a lot of that, but they should do that because it improves the physical health of people. And the few companies that I see do go there, the employees see each other and they kind of pal around, and that's important. So,
The Bush Tennis Center here offers executive packages as well too.
who does? Oh, the Bush.
The new tennis center,
Yeah.
the Bush Tennis Center.
Do they?
For companies now, they're starting a big, so where the company can purchase so many memberships, and then people can go out there with their families already paid for by your company.
Pretty neat. Okay, next slide. We touched on this, but self-improvement means you have to go to school and learn more things. Seems like work, but this actually does motivate people quite a bit because most people want to do well. I encourage a formal training program for everybody, not just, go stand next to Bob here and do what Bob does, but there should be something written down and certain mileposts that are written down ahead of time, what you should accomplish, and then you make a big deal out of it. Okay, you've done step 2 or whatever, learning about this and this for the last week or so. So I'll sign you off. Let them know that you accomplished something and so forth. That's the way OJT should be. The seminars are more for larger companies, in-house seminars where you bring new employees together, preferably in the same category, and have an expert teach them, talk to them about things. It doesn't matter what it is. Maybe it's a piece of equipment and you're walking them through that. I know that I've been through the Weatherford training, several seminars, and they have a training site, and they bring groups of employees in and they train them right there. Other cases, if you can't afford that, you can send them out to other agencies, companies. There's a lot of them in this area. There's some down in Houston and so forth. A pretty big deal. If you're not directly involved with production or anything like that, then there are seminars for whatever your profession is. And you should pay to send your employees there. Not only does it improve their quality, but they feel like it's a pretty good deal. And if they think there's more coming, they're more inclined to stay with your company. Cross-training is something that, of course, that's learning different jobs. They become more valuable. You feel more appreciated that way. Doesn't cost you much of anything. Next slide. Oh, you knew I had to say this. But seriously, tuition reimbursement is, from my world, I can't begin to tell you how many people in engineering and in business have their employees paying their college tuition. A high percent are paying it, very high percent. And of course, they expect to get good grades and so forth. Next slide. I don't think I want to go into this. How are we doing on time, Jesse?
We got, it's 7 minutes after the hour. You got 30
Okay.
minutes.
Well, let me just touch on it a little bit. I don't think I want to talk about options or restricted stock unless you have questions about that. But the grants are a bigger deal, meaning if it's I'm going to say publicly traded company where there is stock in a company, you should try to give employees some ownership in it. And when I say publicly traded, some companies may not be a Weatherford or a Neighbors, but they may be a much smaller company of 50 employees, perhaps. And they do still have stock, it's just not publicly traded. And for what it's worth, it's very hard to sell it. But it doesn't really matter. If you can give them a share or two of the company, and then the next year another share or two, the amount of ownership is minuscule. But you would not believe how they feel about that. I don't know, how many people in this room actually own stock in their company? Not many of you. Okay, some of you do. But I've seen how that affects the way that employees will talk about their company. And they care about things like waste. Oh, this is being wasted, I better take care of this, because they start to care about things like that. Now that is motivation, going 110%. When you own the company, you care about the profits, you look at it, you are informed of how much a company is making or losing, it makes a difference. It's a powerful motivator. And once you have your stock system in place, it costs very little. Next slide. All right. This is a combination of management and motivation. It's called goal setting. I'm a strong believer in this. I follow this to the letter. And I hope that you do. The concept of goal setting means that there's certain goals that the company is trying to accomplish, of course. And those goals should transcend into particular department goals and then transcend into employee goals. They should match up, or what the heck are you doing? So There should be a match. That should be the first thing as a supervisor. Think about that. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is connected to it. This is how you do it. It's kind of like a cookbook. You establish your goals, and that is done together. So you sit down with each individual employee, and you say, well, let's just use hamburgers. Last month you cooked an average of, I don't know, 50 hamburgers a day or something like that. I've been keeping track of that. What do you think you're going to do this year? Well, they're going to say one of three things. Well, I'm going to do just as I did last year, or maybe I'll do only 40 this year, or maybe, well, I could do better than that. I could do 60 hamburgers. Okay, so then you have a discussion. Of course, obviously, this relates to your industry. So you're just going to do the same thing you did last year, and we get that right. No difference, same thing, okay? You write that down. No change. Or if they say, I'm going to do less, I mean, let's exaggerate it. They won't, but say, I'm going to do less. Well, gee, I guess you're not going to perform as well next year. Hint, you may get a pay cut. So most employees would say, I think I can do better. I can increase a little bit. So I'm going to increase it by 10% or 20%, or maybe there's a stretch there. This will obviously transcend into performance improvement and pay raises. So then the next question is, when? In what period of time? Oh, well, maybe we can do this in 1 month or 1 quarter. So it must be very specific. We're doing the hamburger count. You can measure how many, 50 to 60, and within 1 month. Okay, so you can apply that to any business in the world. And then you'll do that with multiple goals. So now you've written it down, and then you have an agreement, everyone understands it, and then you follow up. A few days later or a few weeks later, you come back and say, how are we doing toward that goal? Are we getting to the 60 hamburgers? So you remind them, and they know that they have ownership in the goal that the employee set. It was the employee's idea, not yours. Dirty trick, isn't it? So then you can give them feedback on that. And then when it comes around to performance appraisal time, whether it's the end of the month or the end of the year, you can say, here's the goal that you set up, and here's how you did performance-wise. You achieved it, you didn't achieve it, and there's never any question about the performance appraisal. They know. They know before it's even the day of it. I found it to be incredibly powerful and easy on the part of the supervisor. Very easy if you'll just take that first step to establish the goals together and write it down. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so to move to the higher level, I alluded to this earlier. How do you really move an employee from 100% to 110%? And I've conducted studies on this. I've seen other people conduct studies on this. Look at this for a moment. Number one, from studies, say that of high-performing organizations, 20% have a lot of camaraderie, pure motivation. What does that mean? They get along well with their employees. The peers motivate them. There's an inside desire to do a good job, the feeling of being encouraged. Okay, next slide. There's a concept called job embeddedness, and I never could quite word it right. But when you get to a point where your friends are at work, your good friends are at work, where you socialize with them after work, whether you're going to the bar or whether you're going to play athletics or you're going to the gym or you're coming to each other's house, they're your friends. So when you're at work, most people don't want to goof off in front of their friends, a matter of personal pride. And if their friend does a good job, you'll say, Sam, I'm so proud of you. You're doing great. Fantastic. Pat on the back. Your buddies are appreciating what you do. Your buddies are now encouraging it, not the supervisor. How do you get to that point? It really works. So it's the job of the supervisor to set this up. And you set it up by having outside activities, barbecues, picnics, parties. I hate to say that, but it works. I've tried it. And then pretty soon the employees have their friends there. They want to impress their friends care, they want to help their friends, and vice versa. So, you know, if there's trash on the floor, say, hey, let's pick this up. you know? They want to look good in front of their friends. There's an experiment, this is terrible, but there's an experiment done a few years ago about people going to the bathroom. If no one is in the restroom, no one washes their hands when they walk out. But if they think someone is in there, even in a stall, they will wash their hands. Don't answer this, because you're probably guilty of it. But if they think someone knows that they didn't wash their hands, they will wash their hands. Why? Because they care what other people think of them. It's true. So it's a powerful motivator. Next slide. Okay, this is what I was just talking about, embeddedness. You will encourage other workers. You won't let them down. And turnover is sharply reduced, sharply reduced. They will show up because they don't want to let their friends down. They want to carry their load. It works. Okay, next slide. Engagement is kind of related to that. Somehow you as a supervisor have to find out something about each employee. Remember one of the first slides I had? Every employee is different. Now you have to work as a supervisor. You have to find out, why is each employee different? And it's not easy. You've got other things to do. You're worried about sales, production, reports, meetings. Somehow you have to sit down and talk to every employee several times and find out what motivates them. It's hard work. And now that motivation goes to goal setting, working with the employee, individualizing your incentives, and following up on it. But that's what it takes to go 110%. It works. Next slide. Briefly, you've got employees that are engaged. It's about 20% of your employees. They work with passion, 110%. They drive innovation, move the organization forward. Those that are not engaged, they just kind of go through the job. This is about 60% of most employees in a company. And you may see this in the companies where you work at. They don't do anything wrong, they just don't do 110%. They're okay. And then you have some that are actively disengaged and they will become destructive. This is 10 to 15% of your employees if you don't know that. And they will actually talk bad about the company and discourage other people. And you have to watch out for those. Best thing to do is move them on. But
move them on, would that be a righteous reason to fire them?
of course. Yeah.
She can have a process.
It's performance issues. Yeah.
Processes.
They're the few that said they only wanted to do 40 hamburgers. Low performers. Yeah, of course. The point, though, is that 85% of your employees are either actively engaged, great employees, or could be. Could be. I like to be more positive. They could be. I think we're close to being out of time. These are the problems with disengaged employees. As you know, high turnover, sicknesses, and so forth. You want to get to this point. Actively engaged employees, that top 15%, will account for an increased 20% of profitability in the company. You want to get the employees to that point if you can, or at least close to that. Next slide. I think it's the last one. I'm going to skip that one. So in summary, these are the things we talked about. Motivation and goals. Goal setting are related. Make sure your goals are what the company needs to have. Understand your employee needs. Remember, that's not easy to do. The incentives have to be relevant to what they need, that matches up. Compensation and financial compensation is oftentimes not the key to motivation. It's important that you have the right package there, but it's not going to motivate them on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't. And you want to get highly engaged employees so that they care. Questions? You ask questions along the way. Any others? How many people in the room? Let me get an idea who's in here. Any HR people? I suspect there's we've met before, I think. No?
Maybe at the Sharm.
Probably there, yeah. How many people are in operations, production? Okay. I'm just curious. All right. No other questions. That's everything I've got. Be glad to talk to you afterwards. Thanks.